going in. It's going to sit right up on that block, just like that right there. What I'm going to do here on this wall is I've got a washer and a dryer that's going to sit right here. I want to hang some cabinets. There's going to be one cabinet going to hang right here, and it is a 16-inch cabinet. Then I've got a custom piece of oak work that I found that was built in 1983. Go ahead and put it in the center. It's going to have a couple shelves on it, and then that's going to be flanked with another cabinet that's going to match this one right here. Now, Now these are all used cabinets, and a little tip for you, if you have a Habitat for Humanity in store in your town, go check it out, because you can find some real nice bargains in there. A lot of things I'll buy in there, such as these cabinets, other things, I get them for a fraction of the price of what brand new would cost. And you know what? A lot of times they're built a lot better than anything you can find in the store today. So go check it out. Habitat for Humanity. You're not only helping the organization, but you're getting a good deal yourself. And you can store a lot of your soaps and liquids and cleaners and things like that in this area right here and make it nice and neat. The insulation was already here. I've kind of laid it out to when you hang some cabinets like this, you always want to make sure that you do a real good job. You make sure that the cabinets are going to hold no matter what you're going to put on it. And if you sell your home, they could put bowling balls inside here. You want to make sure that you build it strong enough that it's going to hold up to whatever anybody decides to store inside these cabinets. So in a case like this, what I've always found out is the best thing to do. You could try to find a stud, try to work your cabinets out, maybe put a screw only in one of the cabinets and then maybe not have a screw here, because these studs right here are 2 foot on center, so you don't have a lot of things to nail to. It's always better to figure out where you're going to mount the top of the cabinet, where you're going to mount the bottom of the cabinet, and then you basically put 2x4s in horizontal. That'll give you a ton of room to fasten into. So once I get the cabinet up here, the screws will come in somewhere in the middle of this 2x4 right here, and the cabinet's going to be nice and strong. At the top and the bottom, I'll do the same for the shelving piece, the oak shelving piece, and then the cabinet that's going to be on this side will be the same way. And I start out by figuring out about where my 2x4 block anchor should be, and at that point right there, you can see I went ahead and I cut the facing out of the insulation. Now the reason I do this, you leave the facing on there, whenever you go to put your board on there, it'll push all the insulation back. A lot of times, if you cut it out like this, the 2x4 is going to go in there, but it's going to compress that just a little bit, not as much as the whole paper and everything was being compressed. The best way insulation works is to be as fluffy as possible. So you really don't want to condense it if you can keep from it. In certain situations like this, it's worth the sacrifice for a little bit of insulation, R value, to get these cabinets hung in there and do the job right the way it needs to be done. When I mount this block here, I shoot a couple screws in this way. I shoot a couple through the other side right here. That is nice and strong, and continue that process all the way through right here. Makes for a pretty good job. I always like to use construction screws when I put anything together. That way, if you have to change it, it's very easy to back the screws out and put it back. Plus, you don't have all that banging going on. So I'm going to go ahead and measure these up. Let's check this bottom one. I've got a little bit of a problem with this one because I've got a pipe that's actually running down right in this general area right here. And I'm going to see if my board is going to fit in there. If it doesn't, I'm going to have to take and carve out the back of my board because of that pipe right there. I wanted to show you real quick this little trick here. This makes it nice, especially if you're a beginner carpenter and you're trying to do some remodel. Things like this will kind of save you a lot of hassle. So I've got 22 and 9/16 is what those blocks need to be. So I actually have some 2x4s that I have salvaged from when I surgically removed everything from this section. That's another reason why I like to surgically remove stuff, because that way there you have extra wood that doesn't cost you a dime to put back in. And this is a 25-year-old 2x4 right here. It seems to me like it's a lot better wood and it's easier to work with than the 2x4s that you go and get at Home Depot or Lowe's today. When I measure a board like this, I'll reach out, hook it on the end. Always make sure at that end you're hooking on is nice and square. I can look at it and tell you if it's square or not, but if you're new in the business, you might want to take a square and put on there, because it's very important that end right there is square. Once you got your tape hooked on there, so then you want to come down here, and there is my 22 and 9/16. If you don't know how to read a tape, that's a real good place to start. You need to know how to read a tape. You need to know what all these little marks are on here, because they're all very important if you're going to build, and especially if you're going to have any precision to your work whatsoever. You need to know what all these marks are, because you're going to end up using all of them. Here's 22, 22 and a half would be right there. The little mark beyond it is 9/16. The best way to do it is take it, put your pin on it, bring it down one way, put your pin back on the 9/16, and come down the other way. Just make you a little V like that right there. Let me show you where I have it marked it. Like this. Come down, put your pin on it again, go the other way. There is your mark. That is exactly where your saw blade is going to run. What I like to do is once I mark it like that, I will put an X on the piece that I want to keep. Now, I notice some carpenters are different. They'll put an X on the piece they're going to throw away, and this is the way I like to do it. So, very important. What that'll also do, your saw blade on your saw is about 1/8 of an inch thick. Between a 1/16 and an 1/8 inch thick is how much that saw blade cuts off. If I want to use this piece, and if I set my saw blade on this side of the line and cut, this board's going to end up being 1/8 inch too short. So what I want to do is I want to make sure my saw blade is on this side of the line. That way it'll cut right to my mark right here. The board will be 22 and 9/16. But you got to make sure you take in consideration the width of that saw blade. That's very important. So there we go. I've got it cut out. There's part of the V, the other half of the V coming down. There was where my mark was, so I had my saw blade on the other side. So I've got exactly 22 and 9/16, exactly what I needed. Okay, let's see if this is going to work with that pipe in there like that. You see, this insulation will push back, but that pipe is going nowhere. Set that in there. All right. Well, hot dog. It worked out. It's right up against that pipe. It is flush on both sides, so I think that is going to work. All right. Now, once again, you don't see me putting a level on these pieces. I don't really need a level on these pieces because my cabinets, when I put my cabinets up and I run those are going to be level. Where I'm going to put the screw is somewhere in the middle here, so if it's a little higher, a little lower, it doesn't matter. I just basically eyeball it, get it to look about where it needs to be. Right in there looks pretty good. It doesn't always work out that way. When you're remodeling, a lot of times things will work out. Sometimes they don't. If you have no patience, don't get into remodeling. It takes a lot of patience to remodel. That is for sure. I've always said, it's a lot easier building something new than it is to remodel something. I think it takes a lot more skill and technique in order to remodel. Okay, unfortunately, the bottom piece, that pipe coming down the wall, it must be a little bit at an angle. Even though my 2x4 on top fit, when I got down to put this bottom one in, it did not fit. It was wanting to rock back and forth, and I couldn't get it flush between both studs. And so you got to stop right there, and you got to punt, and you got to make sure you make it right before you go on from there. So what I did was I went out to my saw, and you can see I just made a series of cuts. Took my miter saw and just ran it through here. That's probably 3/8 of an inch or so. I'll just take a chisel. I'll chisel those out, bring it back in, set it into place. If it works out good, fine. If not, I'll have to go a little bit deeper on it. But that's how you're going to do something like that to make it work. Okay, nothing fancy about it at all. You just go out there, take your chisel. It's not a piece of furniture. You're just whacking out a little bit of wood right there. So that way it's going to fit. Let's take it over there and see if it's going to work. Okay. It looks like to me like I'm going to have to take out just a little bit more. I'd rather make sure that these two ends were flush. See how it's rocking back and forth right there? So I'm going to go ahead and take out a little bit more to make sure that that fits nice and flush, and we can go on with it from there. Okay, probably about another 1/4 inch or so. Okay, let's see how this is going to work. Took out a little bit more. Put it in there. Whoop. No wonder it didn't work. That's the wrong way. There we go. Flush on both ends. Now, you know when I talk about remodeling and I talk about don't get into business, don't try a project if you have no patience, there's a good example right there. I can see someone taking the time to carve it out once, being mad that they've got to do it, but they're going to go ahead and do it. Come back here, it's still not working just right, and try to pressure it. Try to push that pipe back there, try to push your board back there, try to make it work. And it's from my years of experience, I just learned it's better to just take a deep breath, go cut it again. You're obviously using a saw. Be careful when you cut it. Come back, put it in, and now I can move on with the project. Okay, in case you were curious about the camo blanket I've got here, it's actually a camo packing blanket, like if you're going to move, and mover's blanket. But anytime you work in a bathroom or a laundry room or something like that, you've always got a washer and dryer sitting there, and you want to be sure and put a lot of cushion down, and you want to make sure you don't scratch it, because that's your worst case scenario. You come in, you do a small job, you walk away, you end up scratching it, and you owe them for a new dryer, new washing machine. And a lot of these go for $1,000 or more a piece these days. So you got to be careful, cover everything up first, and it just makes it a lot easier. The thing about construction and remodeling, you can learn to play the guitar, you can learn to play golf, you can learn all kind of things. But if you learn construction and if you learn remodeling throughout your lifetime, it's amazing how much money you can save if you learn the techniques of construction. If you're not a carpenter or you're not a contractor, how would it feel to you from here on in, everything that you do to your home is going to be labor free? Still got to pay for the material, but labor free. And you just got to keep working them and working them. You got to be careful to keep all your fingers, keep your eyes, keep your ears. Just make sure you use all the protection that you need. But once you get good at it, you can save so much money. The cabinets I'm going to hang up in here, I got at the Habitat store, which I mentioned earlier. It's kind of funny. When I walk into a warehouse like that, all that stuff laying everywhere, I could imagine that if you didn't know construction, it just must seem like a bunch of junk. To me, it's a treasure mine. Because I can go through there and I can see, okay, there's some tile right there. I know how to do that. There's some doors right there. There's something else right there. There's some ceiling panels. There's some flooring. It's kind of funny because when I walk through there, it's like I know I can put it all together for free just for the price of the material. Construction stuff like these 2x4s, they don't go bad. As long as they're not out in the weather, they didn't rot. And in fact, speaking of a 2x4, mentioning that this piece of wood right here is 25 years old. Number one, it is super light. If you go buy a 2x4 today at Lowe's or Home Depot, it's heavy. They are just saturated with moisture, and they're just heavy and they're hard to work with than the 2x4s of yesteryear. Not to mention, if you look at this 2x4 here, and I'm not sure you're going to be able to see this in the camera or not. This isn't a real good end shot to this one right here. But this 2x4 right here, the rings on the tree are real close together. That this tree took a long time to grow. It took its time to grow. If you look at some of the new 2x4s they have out on the market, or any kind of wood out on the market these days, the rings in the tree are far apart. That's because they shoot them with so much stuff. They make the trees grow as fast as they possibly can. And I don't believe they're as strong as they used to be, quite the quality of wood that you used to get a long time ago. And in fact, if you look at this 2x4 right here, in today's standards, that's almost clear white pine. That is amazing how clear that is. Hey, as I'm putting this next block in, I'll tell you a little story about when I was talking about making sure you cut on the right side of the line. I learned that from experience right when I got in the construction business right out of high school. Knew an older guy, was working on houses, working on apartments, working on things like that. I decided he wanted to know if I'd be interested in joining the crew, and I said, heck yeah, that's where I'm going to be. I had been working this job for quite a while. They put me as a saw man. And a saw man is somebody that stands down on the ground and everybody else is up on the house, up on the roof, up on the rafters, and they yell down how they need boards cut, the length of boards to cut. It could be a 2x4, 2x6, could be a 2x12. The saw man is in charge of cutting it and then throwing it back up to them. Come to think of it, we were actually running some cedar siding. Some cedar siding we were running, as they used to put them on the diagonally on the side of buildings. Used to be big back in the 80s. Back in the late 70s and 80s used to be a big deal. Cedar was real cheap, and you notice there's a lot of buildings back then had cedar put on it. Well, I kept cutting, and the old boy I was working for, he would come over to the edge, and he would take it, and he would throw it back down at me. And he said it was wrong. I said, what do you mean? His name was Neil. I said, Neil, what do you mean it's wrong? You told me the measurement, I measured it and I cut it. He goes, I'm telling you, dude, it's wrong. Threw it down at me. All right, took another one, cut it, gave it back to him. He walked over, come back, bam, threw it right back down at me. You need to learn to read your tape measure. I said, man, I know how to read a tape measure. What are you talking about? He come down off the roof, come over to me. He said, let me see you cut this board. He goes, I need, and whatever the measurement was, 96 and an eighth, or whatever the measurement was. I said, okay. Stretched my tape out, marked it, marked my line. He goes, okay, well, it looks like you're doing it right. I said, well, yeah, I know how to do this. Went to cut it on the wrong side of the line. Man, he almost smacked me upside my head with that piece of board. That's exactly what I was doing, is I was cutting it, I would mark it, mark my line, and then was cutting on the wrong. He said, dude, the wrong side of the line. And it's like, oh man. And all of a sudden I got it. It's not only that you can cut on the wrong side of the line, but even if you mark your line and you take your saw blade and go right up through the middle of the line, board is still going to be probably about a 1/32 to a 1/16 short. Now that may not matter if you're building an old tree house, or barn, or a chicken coop, something like that. It may not matter if the boards really don't fit exactly right. But if you really want to learn construction, you got to learn that's how precision that you can get with these saws. You got to learn to cut on the right side of the line. Very important. So a lot of these things I'll pass on to you is actually experience that happened to me, and I don't want it to happen to you. More screws, put that in. Hey, I'm about ready to hang some cabinets. Woo! Don't know if I'm going to get to it today or not. The day's kind of getting long in the tooth, but we'll see. Maybe. Now here's something else I'm going to do, and this is from experience right here. But remember that pipe that was going through here we had to carve out? I'm going to go ahead and mark that down like this, and I'm going to put pipe on it and do the same up above. And a lot of times something like this, and you get to thinking, oh, well, I'll remember that pipe's there. But you know what? You may not. You may get real busy and get to hanging these cabinets and take a big screw and run it through there and go right into that pipe right there. So it's always a good idea, and there could be a subcontractor come in too. They have no idea there's a pipe back there, and they go running a screw through there and bam, hit the pipe. So it's always a good idea when you think of something, like I was getting ready to put this board up, and I just happened to think of that, and I thought I'd turn the camera on and show you, because that's important. That when you think of something like that, go ahead and take care of it. That way it's not going to bite you down the road.